In December 1920, Ho Chi Minh became a representative to the Congress of Tours of the Socialist Party of France, and was a founding member of the French Communist Party. Although 1890 has been accepted to be his real birth year, he also used 4 other birth years: 1891, 1892, 1894 and 1895. He had 3 siblings: sister Bac Lien, a clerk in the French army, brother Guyen Sin Kiem, who was a geomancer and traditional herbalist, and another brother, named Guyen Sin Yuan, who died in infancy. At various points between 1913 and 1919, Ho claimed to have lived in West Ealing and later in Crouch End, in Hornsey, in the United Kingdom. He reportedly worked as either a chef or dishwasher at the Drayton Court Hotel in West Ealing. As president, he held formal receptions for foreign heads of state and ambassadors at the Presidential Palace, but he didn't live there. He instead ordered the construction of a stilt house at the back of the palace, which is today known as the Presidential Palace Historical Site. He received a French education, attending College Quoc Hoc School, in Hue in central Vietnam. His disciples, Pham Van Dong and Von Nguyen Giap, also attended the school, and so did Ngo Dinh Diem, the future president of South Vietnam. In May 1922, he wrote an article for a French magazine criticizing the use of English words by French sports writers. The article implored Prime Minister Raymond Poincaré to outlaw such franglais, like Le Manager, Le Round, and Le Knockout. During the mourning period, North Vietnam received more than 22,000 condolence letters from 20 organizations and 110 countries across the world, like France, Ethiopia, Yugoslavia, Cuba, Zambia, China, the USSR and many other nations. In 1923, he left Paris for Moscow carrying a passport with the alias Chen Vang, a Chinese merchant. In Moscow, he was employed by the Comintern, studied at the Communist University of the Toilers of the East, and participated in the 5th Comintern Congress in June 1924, before arriving in Canton, in China in November 1924 using the name Lai Thai. In 1941, he returned to Vietnam to lead the Viet Minh independence movement. The Japanese occupation of Indochina that year created an ideal political opportunity for patriotic Vietnamese. There, Men in Black were a 10,000-member guerrilla force that operated with the Viet Minh. He oversaw many successful military actions against the Vichy France and Japanese occupations of Vietnam during World War II. In Saigon, he applied to work as a kitchen helper on a French merchant steamer, using the alias Van Bar. The ship departed on June 5, 1911 and arrived in Marseille, in France on July 5. The ship then left for Le Havre and Dunkirk, returning to Marseille in mid-September. While there, he applied for the French Colonial Administrative School, but his application was rejected. So he decided to begin traveling the world by working on ships and visiting different countries over the next 6 years. While working as a cook's helper on a ship in 1912, he traveled to the United States. From 1912 to 1913, it's thought he may have lived in Harlem, in New York City, and Boston, where he claimed he worked as a baker at the Parker House Hotel. The only evidence that he was in the United States is a letter to French colonial administrators dated December 15, 1912, and postmarked New York City, and a postcard from Paris where he mentioned working at the Parker House Hotel. In 1959, Ho began urging the Politburo to send aid to the Viet Cong in South Vietnam. A People's War on the South was approved at a session in January 1959, and this decision was confirmed by the Politburo in March. North Vietnam invaded Laos in July 1959, supported by the Pathet Lao, and used 30,000 men to build a network of supply and reinforcement routes running through both Laos and Cambodia. It allowed the North to send manpower and material to the Viet Cong with much less exposure to South Vietnamese forces, giving the North a massive advantage. Ho died of heart failure at his home in Hanoi at 9:47 a.m. On September 2, 1969, he was 79 years old. His embalmed body was put on display in a mausoleum in Ba Dinh Square in Hanoi, despite his will stating that he wanted to be cremated. The North Vietnamese government originally announced his death on September 3. A week of mourning for his death was announced nationwide in North Vietnam from September 4 to 11. His funeral was attended by around 250,000 people and 5,000 official guests, which included many international mourners. In early 1969, he suffered a heart attack and was in increasingly bad health for the rest of the year. In July, John Son Tenny, a former French official in Vietnam who knew Ho, secretly relayed a letter written to him from President Richard Nixon. Nixon's letter proposed working together to end this tragic war, but also warned that if North Vietnam made no concessions at the peace talks in Paris by November 1, Nixon would resort to measures of great consequence and force. Ho's reply, which Nixon received on August 30, welcomed peace talks with the U.S. to end the war, but made no concessions. In June 1931, he was arrested in Hong Kong as part of a joint operation between the French colonial authorities in Indochina and the Hong Kong police force. It was intended he be deported back to French Indochina, but Ho was successfully defended by the British solicitor Frank Closeby. Eventually, after appeals to the Privy Council in London, he was reported dead in 1932 to avoid the French extradition agreement. It was ruled that, though he would be deported from Hong Kong, he wouldn't be sent to a destination controlled by France. Ho was released and, disguised as a Chinese scholar, boarded a ship to Shanghai and returned to the Soviet Union, where he studied and taught at the Lenin Institute in Moscow.